Hi warriors, it's me, Linda B, and welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to give you all a little more of Thomas Sowell, Dr. Thomas Sowell. He's talking about Black culture and how it has destroyed most Black Americans. Before we get into it, I want you all to remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you get alerted of new content. And remember, I have a 20,000 subscriber goal by the end of April. This month, I could really use your help. You all have been a blessing to me. It really means a lot. You can also follow me on Rumble, ChatWithMeLindaB, all one word, and also email me, chatwithmelindaB@gmail.com. Now, let's get into it.
The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which Black kids grew up in America today.
So they had
There's no gangster rap in that was pervasively available in Germany.
It's not being Black, it's a way of life. Unfortunately, the way of life is being celebrated not only in rap music, but among the intelligentsia. It is a way of life that leads to a lot of very big problems for most people. Thomas Sowell.
I mean, the average of Black kid today, I think, is probably better off, certainly materially, than say Ben Carson was when he was growing up.
Ben Carson, the famous
Black
surgeon at Johns Hopkins.
Right.
Who is immensely accomplished in every way.
Yes.
Right.
I would say that certainly the Black kids who are growing up today have a higher material standard of living than I had. The difference was that the schools were good when I came along. They were especially good in New York at that time, hard as that is to believe. But the kids who grew up in that same place where I lived, they will not get that same education. Now that can be blamed on somebody, but it has very little to do with what happened 100 or 200 years ago.
I've been hearing that the schools, when the schools were segregated, I've heard it here from Dr. Thomas Sowell, and I've heard it from Vince Everett Ellison, that when the schools were segregated, Black schools were actually good schools. The kids were being well educated, but now that's not the case. Now that's not the case. You guys drop me your comment on why you think that is. He might probably say it right now, but I keep hearing that from people who really study and move in these areas.
And it's true in other countries. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, there's a tribe, the Igbos, who are living in one of the least fertile parts of Nigeria, who were in fact enslaved in centuries past by other tribes and so on. When the British moved in and set up schools, the Igbos went for the schools. By the time Nigeria became independent, the Igbos had climbed above the other groups that had been ahead of them to begin with. But there are all kinds of cross currents of factors, the particular culture, or the particular geography. You run through the whole list of them.
You cite in Intellectuals and Race, you cite an observation by the intelligence expert, IQ scientist, James Flynn, that just stopped me cold. After the Second World War, you've got large numbers of American troops remaining in Germany. For that matter, there's still several tens of thousands there today. And both Black and white American soldiers had children with German women. And Flynn discovered that those children growing up in Germany showed no IQ differences at all. The Black kids and the white kids, the same. Quoting Intellectuals and Race, Professor Flynn concluded that the reason was that the offspring of Black soldiers in Germany, and now you're quoting Professor Flynn, grew up in a nation with no Black subculture, close quote. Which means what? Which means they experienced exactly the same expectations. Is this
No, the expectations are external. The culture in which they grew up was not the culture in which Black kids grew up in America today.
So they had...
There's no gangster rap that was pervasively available in Germany.
So here's what I'm getting. There is something about Black subculture in America today that holds African Americans themselves back?
Yes. In fact, I went into this in a previous book in which about black rednecks and white liberals, because that same subculture.
Let's talk about two of your books here.
Before we get into that, what he's talking about his books, Black culture has been invaded with this Black subculture of gangster rap. And we've all seen the videos with women who are half naked or just about completely naked, and they're talking about their body parts. And you've seen the men who are drinking and smoking. They've got guns and they've got their grills in their mouth, and people are partying. And this is what some of the kids, some of the boys want to be. They aspire to be this growing up. And it promotes violence. And if you notice, a lot of these young Black rappers, they die young. They're killed. You know, they get in all sorts of trouble. There's this young thug case that's going on in Fulton County right now with DA Vonnie Willis's office is over that. And you've got, you saw what happened to Tupac and Biggie and many others. There was a rapper called Juice WRLD. There was someone named, was it Nipsey, or I can't remember the name, but he died at 33 years old a few years ago. You guys probably know who I'm talking about. They seem to die very, very, very young. I mean, their life is full of violence, and this is the life that they actually came from, and they still were in that life after they rose to prominence in the rap world. And it just leaves a lot of young corpses with no offspring. Nothing really good comes out of it at all.
Go ahead.
Because that very same subculture held whites in the South back as well. That in the time, this mental testing in the First World War turned up, among other things, the fact that whites from various 4 or 5 southern states scored lower on the mental test than blacks from 4 or 5 northern states. And so it really was a question of the subculture that was there, which was a handicap to both.
All right. And so whose job is it to say, wrong subculture, folks, you're harming yourselves?
Well, I would think in an ideal world that intellectuals might take on that task, but the world that we live in, I've noticed, is not ideal.
All right. What is to be done? Take a look at President Lyndon Johnson speaking at Howard University in 1965.
Oh, yes.
But freedom is not enough. You do not wipe away the scars of centuries by saying now, you are free to go where you want and do as you desire and choose the leaders you please. You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair.
It's pathetic.
I got to say something now. You all need to see my video if you haven't already on LBJ. That was Lyndon Baines Johnson. He succeeded JFK as president. And you know what, if you look at my video, you know what part he had to do with what happened to JFK, and I'll leave it at that. But this is a Black university. This is a Black college. This is Howard University. And here is this racist. LBJ was a flaming racist, and they had him speak. I get it. They feel like, okay, he signed the Civil Rights Act. He signed the Voting Rights Act. He didn't want to sign it. He said he was going to have those ends voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And this racist was there, standing there saying what he just said, thinking you can compete with everybody else once you've been disadvantaged. That's basically what he said in a nutshell, the way I interpreted it, which is like this little softball racism. That man was a racist, and he did away with a lot of people. He unalived them, a ton of them, but probably about 20 people at least. I hope he repented before he left this world. That's a hot mess.
It's not a question of, there's no you who has the control to be completely fair or completely unfair. I mean, the circumstances are. So someone once criticized the mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair, and I think it was David Reisman who said the tests are not unfair. Life is unfair, and the tests are measuring the results. But who has control of life? Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
So Lyndon Johnson, he's in fact, although good liberal that he was, at least in regard, Lyndon Johnson had a complicated career and changed positions on issues many times. But good liberal though he was at that moment, he was in fact engaging in a breathtaking arrogance.
Yes.
On two counts. One, that white people were the ones who were responsible for where black people stood in the race, that it was up to whites entirely. That blacks, as he described, I put
devastating.
the black people are
devastating.
passive; they're acted upon.
That's right. That's right.
And then the second act of arrogance is the supposition that somehow the federal government could fix it.
Yes, it is staggering. But if you wanted to be charitable, you could say, well, he said this in 1965. But if you say, all right, why are people now repeating it in 2013 when we've had nearly half a century of experience to the contrary? And if you look within the black community, those blacks who had escaped what I call the black redneck culture, they've moved on. So, but it's the culture the different parts of the black community had. They were different.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, in his famous 1965 report entitled "The Negro Family: The Case for National Action," close quote. Longish quotation, but it gets to something, I believe. Moynihan, the fundamental problem is that of family structure. The Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. A middle class has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled and poorly educated, the fabric of conventional social relationships has all but disintegrated. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. Close.
This is what I see a lot of now with a lot of the young Black Americans. About 3 out of 4 Black children are born out of wedlock, and they're impoverished. Their parents are not educated. Their parents are not married to each other. And these children go to poor performing schools. And there's a high percentage that they themselves will have children out of wedlock, and that the cycle will repeat itself. I was part of a ministry with young kids in the underprivileged areas of the town that I live in, which is in Georgia. And there was a white couple that was helping a white Christian couple, a beautiful Holy Spirit-filled couple that was helping these Black children. And they were a married couple. And the wife, she got pregnant. And one of the little kids, but they said, so whose last name are you going to give your child? And she was like, what? We have the same last name. We're married. And it's like the little girl was stumped. She was like, what? It's like the culture of what she was used to or accustomed to seeing was not that the mother was married. And so she asked this white woman who's married to a white man, what are you going to name, whose last name you're going to give your child? And that was very sad and eye-opening to me. And we came there, we helped the kids learn about God, helped them with their homework, gave them something to eat and other activities, and provided them a safe place to be for hours until they went back home, so that they just wouldn't be out in the streets going about, getting into trouble. And that's their way of thinking. And so the Black family has been broken apart by welfare, as I've said multiple times on this channel, and it has not benefited us at all. We enable people to stay where they are when we give them too much, just enough to survive, but not to thrive. And that is what welfare has done. And, a Democrat can come along and tell the poor Black people, or poor people, period. It's not just about Black, it's Americans, we'll give you a little bit more welfare benefit. And they're thinking, a lot of people would think that's a good idea. They're looking out for me. They're not looking out for you. They're trying to keep you where you are, so you be satisfied where you are, so you will not aspire to do better. They want you not to go get a trade and open your own business. They want you not to go to college and get an upper level degree so that you can be a lawyer or a doctor or these other beautiful things, or an accountant or an engineer. They don't really want you to do that. They want you to stay dependent upon them. So they'll increase it a little bit by little bit to make you think, "Ooh, they doing me right." No, they're not doing you right. Please understand. They're keeping you where you are, which is on a Democrat plantation. That's what slave owners did for their slaves. They provided barely anything that you could call shelter, scraps from the pig, and just something to have for clothes, some raggedy clothes. But yet you were on the plantation and they were supposedly taking care of you. But what would happen if you tried to escape the plantation? What would happen to you then? Because you wanted to be free, because you wanted better. We got to think better, people.
Close quote. When Moynihan wrote those words, the illegitimacy rate among African Americans was 25%. Today, the illegitimacy rate among white Americans is 36%. Among Hispanics, more than 50%, and among African Americans, more than 70%.
Yes.
Aside from throwing up your hands in despair, what is to be done?
The first thing to be done is to understand that this was a result of policies begun in the 1960s. This is not a legacy of what happened 100 years before the 1960s.
The breakdown of the Black family is not a legacy of slavery.
No, if you, the classic study of this goes all the way back to the era of slavery, and they find that most Black kids, even under slavery, had lived with two parents. And that was true all the way up until the 1960s. And so if you really want to find out what's changed, it has changed since the 1960s. And the fact that whites now have a higher rate of illegitimacy than Blacks had when Moynihan wrote suggests that this is something that spreads out. But if you look at something else, if you look at those Blacks, and look at Black husband-wife families, the poverty rate among such families has been in single digits every year since 1994. And so if you look at the external causes, why the husband and wife families and the welfare single mom families all are facing the same society and objective things, but the results are radically different because the cultures and values are different.
So you would roll back welfare. I guess that's the principal policy. So what would Tom Sowell do? One, you'd eliminate welfare, you'd reform welfare. What would you do?
Roll it back.
All right. And what about affirmative action?
Eliminate it.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Colorblind policy completely. All right. What prospect for that do you see?
None.
No black leader of any standing. I'm talking about a political leader as opposed to an intellectual such as yourself. You've got, there's you, there's Walter Williams. Do you get the sense that there's a growing generation, a rising generation of African-American intellectuals who say, enough of this, I'm with Tom Sowell?
Well, I don't know if they'll go that far. There's no point.
That would be asking a lot.
There's no point being reckless. But I think there are people like Shelby Steele and many others, Larry Elder, you can run through a long list. And there are more such people now than there were, say, in the 1970s. But in terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for Black leaders to blame all problems in the Black community on the larger society. And that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the Black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many Blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group. That there's no point. I mean, why would you, if you believe what they say, why would you want to knock yourself out in school knowing that the man is not going to let you get anywhere? One of the most pathetic things I heard in recent years was a young black man saying that, at one point he thought he would join the Air Force and become a pilot. And then he says he realized that the white man is not going to let a black man become a pilot. And he was saying this decades after the Tennessee Airmen had established their reputation in combat in Europe.
What he says right here, Dr. Thomas Sowell, really is something that I've heard growing up. I've heard various people in my family say, not a lot of people. I've heard a person here and there say, and this one person in particular comes to mind saying that when you want to do something, the white man won't let you. What do you mean the white man won't let you? You can't be stopped if God is on your side and you work hard. And this man said the same thing. The white man is not going to let him. Like, you need permission from another human being to be anything you want to be in your life. If you guys are thinking like that, that's just, in my opinion, this is just my opinion. My opinion is that you're being lazy because you're using that as a cop-out not to even try, because it is going to take work. It is going to take sacrifice. It is going to take a lot of effort and less sleep. It's going to take getting up early and going to bed late to accomplish a lot of goals that we have for ourselves. And if we're going to sit up here and say, well, I'm black, the white man won't let me, that's just being lazy. That is a cop-out. The Tuskegee Airmen, just like he said, the Tuskegee Airmen had already done their mission. He could have been a pilot if he wanted to. He was choosing the cop-out way. And some of you may feel like that's being mean, but we make our choices. Slavery is a choice. Being uneducated, once you get to a certain age and you can make your own decisions, that is a choice, because we can decide to go back to school or stay where we are. It is a choice. Make the right one.
But the hopelessness is one of the big products of the race industry. That you have no chance. I remember giving a talk at Marquette, and at the end of the talk, among the questions that was asked, a young black man got up and he said, even though I am graduating from Marquette University, what hope is there for me? And having gone through college when I was in the 50s, I don't remember any blacks saying that in the 1950s, when there was a lot more obstacles to overcome than there were when this guy is graduating from Marquette. But you have to produce that kind of feeling in order to serve the interests of those in the race industry.
Final question then. Maybe we can think in terms of that young man at Marquette, or let's put it this way. Somewhere watching this interview, there's a young Thomas Sowell. There's an African American who's smart and wants to do something with his life. It seems to me we've already got one piece of advice you'd offer to him is stay away from the races industry. Stay away from the race hustlers. What advice would you give a young Thomas Sowell? How do you make something of yourself as an African American in America today?
The way anybody else would. You equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay for.
Amen. Equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay for. That is what you do. And that is Dr. Thomas Sowell. And I also wanted to add that this interview is from 2013. So it is an older interview, but still holds true today. And what he said about that young man feeling hopeless and feeling just like, what hope is there for me, even though I'm graduating from Marquette? And Thomas Sowell said they didn't feel like that back in the 1950s. Black people didn't feel hopeless, and they had more to overcome because there was Jim Crow laws and a lot more, overt racism that people had to put up with. And I'm just shocked. This is far from what we were about 60 years ago. We came from two-parent homes. People walked the streets properly dressed. The men did not have their pants sagging. Women walked around with their dresses and their purses and gloves and nice little hats. We walked around respectfully, but we lost it. So this is Black culture, and this is what Dr. Thomas Sowell was talking about. Well, you guys, that's it for today's video. But please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. On my way to 20,000 subscribers. I need your help to get there. I'm on my way to 20,000 by the end of this month. You all be blessed. And as I always say, march on, warriors.